Hello, and welcome today to the new video, the truth about the S&P 500's performance. So, before I dive in, welcome again to our systematic trading educational videos and a very short disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor, so whatever I'm saying, take it with a grain of salt to do your own due diligence. Okay? So here's the thought. Today I was thinking about last week and the week before, the market was going down, and everyone was talking about, okay, S&P 500, Nasdaq, Dow, all this wonderful stuff. They all compare to each other, and like, why is it the S&P 500? How does it stacks up against the other different indices? So that was my first thought. And okay, so let me just test it out and see what it looks like. So I literally put it all together, and I'll show you shortly how it all stacks up. So here's the actual S&P 500 in a nutshell. As you can see, from 2007 till now, if I use the compounded returns, excluding the dividends, so I'm not including the dividends right now in this particular case, but excluding the dividends, just the compounded returns, and S&P 500 is making 8% compounded annual growth rate, CAGR. And the maximum drawdown is 56%. 56.4% to be exact, right back in 2009. So that was the financial meltdown. But don't forget, the COVID time was 34%, the 2022 recent time bear market was 25%. So it's not that little, okay? So how does it stack up against, let's say, Russell 1000, which is the large and mega large cap stocks, some small cap stocks included as well in there. Russell 2000, which is more known for micro cap and small cap stocks, so they're all more of a high flying, moving, smaller cap stocks. So they're not really as perceived to be as well as the S&P 500. Russell 3000, sometimes it's perceived as almost like a total stock market. Some people have the indices of the total stock market indices. Well, so there's actually more than 3,000 stocks. There's like about 500 stocks on the market, but there are so many junk stocks that we don't even want to consider. So as far as I'm concerned, let's say Russell 3000 is a good representation of the total stock market right now. Okay, and the S&P 100 is more of the blue chip stocks. They're mega large cap stocks, more established companies. So this is what the S&P 100 stock is. And Nasdaq 100, those are the technology and high growth stocks. So they're the high flyers. They're the one, but they don't include any financials in there, right? So you will not see the seed banks or anything like that in that index. Then biotech stocks, it's all the biotech high flyers. So it's almost like a Nasdaq 100 world, but for biotech companies. Okay, so let's see how they stack up. So here's the Russell 1000. As you can see, first 1,000 stocks, this is by market cap. That's what Russell 1000 is, by the way, just so you know. And S&P 500, which is supposed to be first 500 stocks by market cap, including some additional logic how they get into the S&P 500. So that's why it's not a straightforward, it's just largest cap stocks over there. There's additional some fundamentals portion to it. I just don't want to go into a lot of details in here. But the thing is that I was trying to answer to myself. Is it a good representation of the market? And do they all have the similar characteristics? As you can see, sometimes the red line, by the way, is the Russell 1000, and the yellow brownish line is the S&P 500 behind it. So you can see they almost overlap, right? It's in the drawdowns overlap. That's the drawdown portion of the chart, and the curve overlaps. It's pretty much almost a replica, not identical. Sometimes they diverge. Sometimes Russell 1000 can outperform even, but in reality, they're very close to each other. Now, what happens to the Russell 2000? Those are the small caps and micro cap stocks. As you can see, the divergence is much more severe in this case. Sometimes, 2019 is an example, good example. The market, the stock market, which we keep calling stock market, which is S&P 500 majority of the time, was outperforming the micro caps and small cap stocks because it was all driven by the mega large cap stocks, like the big boys, like Apple's and Microsoft of the world. And all the small ones, they were lagging behind. That's what's happening right now lately too. As you can see, the S&P 500, this yellow line, this brownish line, is going up, while the Russell 2000 is sort of going sideways for the past almost 4 years, right? So from that perspective, you can see that sometimes it cannot perform, like in the 2010, 11 times, the S&P 500, or like here again to 2013, it was really outperforming it. But a lot of times they have a very similar drawdown chart. Like see how this part, the red and brown overlap a lot between each other. Sometimes it can be more severe, like more prolonged the drawdown. So, but it's very close. Now here's the Russell 3000. Don't you see? It's pretty much almost the same as the Russell 1000. And it's almost a replica of S&P 500. So from that perspective, that is why S&P 500 is such a viewed stock index, is because people compare it to basically the overall market, because it is truly a representation of the overall market health. So it is very close. It's very close, repeating what the total market does. As I said, the Russell 3000 is not really total market, but as far as we're concerned, I am concerned right now, I will use it as if it's a total market index. So it's very close. Okay, now what will happen if I go into something like the blue chip stocks? Okay, here's the blue chip. Again, as you can see, very close to S&P 500. S&P 500 can outperform it. You can see this divergence over here every once in a while. But most cases, it's pretty much almost the same. Like in 2020 through 2022, it pretty much replicated itself, right? So the same big boys were moving in exactly the same way as the smaller boys, which were driving the S&P 500 too, right? But over here, you can see the divergence. So in essence, again, we can say that S&P 500 is a very good approximation, even for the big boys as well, right? Because the S&P 500 is weight driven by the big boys inside. They're not equally allocated within the index itself. Now, what will happen to Nasdaq? Well, that's a big change, right? So Nasdaq 100, so it's 100 technology stocks, not including financials. So they are the high flyers. You can see that diverges a lot. So the Nasdaq 100 has a lot more kick into it. It's instead of 8%, it's around 15% returns, CAGR. Very similar drawdown, as you can see. Sometimes it's higher because again it's driven by the same Apple's, Nvidia's right now, Microsoft's and Tesla's of the world, and they are dropping much faster than the S&P 500 does, because S&P 500 has a blend of 500 stocks, not just 100 stocks. And if I would chart it from year 2000, the Nasdaq dropped a lot bigger drop back in 2000, because it was the technology stocks which failed the most, all the internet stocks with the dot-com bust cycle, right? Versus S&P 500 dropped actually slightly more in the financial crisis, because S&P 500 does have financials versus Nasdaq 100 doesn't. So you can see that that's the divergence, right? Already divergence. How about the biotech? Well, again, biotech has a very weird curve, right? It goes up a lot and then can go sideways forever. Like since 2015-ish time frame, in essence, it was pretty much going sideways. I mean, other than after the COVID, the biotech companies obviously picked up because of all the COVID hysteria. But after that, after hysteria passed, you can see it's still going sideways. Over here, it was outperforming a lot. During the financial crisis, it wasn't really dropping as much as the stock market did. But it can go down, like in 2015. It went down and it's sort of going sideways, as it made a little bit of high over here during the COVID times, but then it's just going sideways. But it can outperform a lot. It's as I said, the biotech is almost like you think of it as a Nasdaq 100 of the stock world, of like a regular S&P 500 world, and biotech is basically the same thing for the healthcare stocks. So, just to summarize this short video, so conclusion: S&P 500 is a very good approximation of what the total stock market does. It is not as good for the high flyers like Nasdaq or biotech, but for all intent and purposes, you can, yes, look at the S&P 500 and consider that as your main benchmark. That is why a lot of people use the index investing into S&P 500 because they think it is truly representation of the total market, but it is the same way as any other index. It has the main flaw of big drawdowns. It is truly drawdown heavy index, like any other index, including the high flyer indices. Like they all have the same 50 plus drops in the equity. So if you are in the buy and hold kind of a situation, or you're investing in big banks, that's what you're gonna get. You can easily get into 50 or more drawdown. I'm not trying to scare you. You look at the history, you will see the depression, recession, you will see the dot-com boom and bust. You will see the same story repeating over and over and over again. It is truly the same way, and it can drop. So even the typical corrections, they are within the 10 to 40%. Like, if you think about it, the COVID time was just a correction, 34%, just a correction. So you lost 1/3 of your equity, and at the time you would not even know that it will just go back up and continue marching on its way up. So at any point it can lose a lot of money for you, and especially people panic and they sell and they don't know when to get in, or panic and sell right at the bottom. So beware of this. That is why we preach the systematic trading, where you can put rules on top of everything, including the indices. But I just wanted to have this short video about the index itself, and the truth about it, that it's good, but it's not as good as people portray it in majority of the media, especially. That it can generate you 8% returns, yes, but it can generate you 50% drawdowns easily too. It's not even, you don't have to go far, right? 20 to 30% very easily. 50%, not as easily, but still can happen. 70%, 80% can happen. That happened during the depression time. So beware of that. So that's the truth about it. So to wrap it up, again, if you have questions, as usual, don't forget to use the email. Go to send the email to info@tradingsystems.com. Check our website at tradingsystems.com and book your call if you really want to learn more about systematic trading. Okay, so on this little note, I'm gonna finish today, and thank you, and see you next week.